In a gripping narrative, Red Bear, an experienced scout, vividly describes the most brutal moments of the Battle of Little Bighorn. With raw intensity, he recalls the chaos of gunfire, arrows, and war cries that characterized the confrontation between two distinct cultures. As a warrior who fought alongside Custer's 7th Cavalry, Red Bear's account provides a unique perspective on the tumultuous cultural clash that influenced the American frontier. His compelling testimony immerses the audience in the heart of the battle, where the destiny of a nation was at stake. Therefore, we invite you to sit back, relax, and join us on this intriguing journey. While watching this video, please remember to click the like button and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Custer had commanded a charge and additionally ordered the troops to capture the Dakota horses from their camp. The scouts surged down the dry run, and upon reaching the lone teepee, they found that the other scouts had already encircled it, striking it with their whips. Red Bear joined them, and they paused at the lodge for approximately 30 minutes. One scout remarked that there were ample supplies available. One feather entered the teepee, partook of the soup left for the fallen Dakota warrior, and also consumed some of the meat. At that moment, Custer approached on horseback with Fred Gerard, who called out to the scouts, "You were instructed to advance directly into the Sioux village." While the scouts were inspecting the lone teepee, Custer, who had moved ahead of his men, caught up with them and chastised them, using both words and gestures to convey, "I ordered you to move forward without delay. You have disobeyed me. Step aside and allow the soldiers to pass in the charge. If any among you lacks courage, I will confiscate his weapons and consider him a coward." One of the scouts responded, "Tell him that if he treats all his white soldiers who lack bravery the same way, it will certainly take him a considerable amount of time." The scouts erupted in laughter, indicating their eagerness for combat. They advanced ahead while Red Bear noticed that Custer veered to the right with his men approximately 50 yards past the lone teepee. Gerard continued onward with the scouts, accompanied by Young Hawk, Goose, Black Fox, Red Star, Strikes 2, Bloody Knife, Little Sioux, Bobtailed Bull, Forked Horn, Red Foolish Bear, Boy Chief, Little Brave, and One Feather. They rode swiftly, charging towards the Little Bighorn River, and upon crossing it, they approached the Dakota camp. After crossing, they split up once more. 6 scouts made a sharp turn to the right, where the Dakota horses were grazing near the timber. Boy Chief and Red Star took the lead, followed closely by Strikes 2, Black Fox, Little Sioux, and One Feather. Meanwhile, Bloody Knife's group moved towards the point of the Dakota camp. Farther ahead, Bloody Knife returned with 3 horses shouting, "Someone take these horses back to the hill. One is for me." Although Red Bear could not see Bloody Knife through the dust, he later identified him. This group included Bloody Knife, Young Hawk, Goose, Forked Horn, Little Brave, Red Bear, Bobtailed Bull, and 2 Crow Scouts. We gathered at the point of the Sioux camp where carbines were fired. We dismounted and began shooting, while the Dakotas returned fire from the bluffs or hills, lying low to remain hidden. At that moment, no one was mounted. We dismounted to shoot from less than a quarter mile away. Forked Horn, positioned at the edge of the timber, called out, "Come this way." As we crossed towards the Dakota village at the ford, soldiers caught up with us scouts. We shifted further to the left, and Red Bear observed soldiers forming a line across the river to his right. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and chaos. He did not identify any white soldiers or officers. When Bloody Knife called out regarding the horses, the soldiers had not yet dismounted, but were present alongside the scouts. As Forked Horn summoned them, the soldiers dismounted and Red Bear mounted his horse to ride towards him. Upon reaching Forked Horn and dismounting, Red Bear noticed a Dakota horse, wounded in the neck or cheek, approaching the position where Young Hawk stood. Young Hawk struck the horse, declaring, "I strike an enemy's horse." The white soldiers were shouting and calling out. Young Hawk then approached Red Bear and said, "Uncle, I have struck the bay horse, and it belongs to me. I give it to you. You have a rope. Take the horse for yourself." Red Bear responded, "What good is it? We are in the midst of battle, and I might be killed. I will have no use for it." Young Hawk then returned to his position. At that moment, Little Brave emerged from the timber, warning that he had overheard the Dakotas in their camp preparing to charge. He suggested, "Let me fire one shot at the camp, and then we should retreat to the hill as they outnumber us." As Little Brave dismounted to take his shot, Red Bear held his horse. Little Brave quickly returned to inform Red Bear that the Dakotas were about to charge and advised them to mount and ride back to the timber and across the river. As they navigated through the bushes towards the river, they were met with a volley from an ambush positioned just across the Little Bighorn. The Dakotas on foot were concealed in the underbrush. The scouts retraced their steps to their original position. While heading towards the river, they encountered a large group of Dakota horsemen between the ridge and the river, advancing towards the ford, shouting and firing. The area was filled with them. When the Dakotas opened fire, Red Bear dismounted and led his horse, but a leaning tree struck his saddle horn, halting the horse's movement. He tugged persistently at the horse's head until it finally moved forward, although the saddle girth broke, causing him to lose his extra cartridges. He attempted to mount again but fell twice as his canteen became trapped beneath him. At last he mounted his horse and pursued Little Brave, who remained mounted and was significantly ahead. Upon emerging from the wooded area, he lost sight of Little Brave, but noticed another rider faintly visible through the smoke and dust. He then observed 10 soldiers on horseback retreating toward the trees. At that moment, a deep ravine caused the soldiers' horses to stumble, and he heard their cries of, "Whoa! Whoa!" He maneuvered his horse to the left to avoid the ravine, leaving the struggling soldiers behind. Continuing his pursuit of Little Brave, he noticed a dark figure ahead that turned left. Concluding that this could not be Little Brave, he pressed on, passing the spot where the rider had turned. Suddenly, Red Bear's horse stumbled, fell, and threw him off. The horse bolted towards the river, prompting Red Bear to chase after it. In this open terrain, characterized by sparse trees and numerous rose bushes, a long, dry branch became entangled in the bridle, dragging behind the horse and bringing it to a halt. Red Bear caught up, but the frightened horse began to rear and jump, complicating his efforts to control it with only his left hand, as he still held his carbine in his right. At that moment, he spotted a painted Dakota warrior approaching him from upstream on his right. The warrior's face was painted red below and yellow above, with additional yellow markings on his forehead and around his eyes. Red Bear fired at the Dakota, who fell from his horse. The horse reared, turned, and fled. All that remained was the relentless sound of carbines firing and the piercing whistles of the Dakotas. He followed his horse to the river, where he saw it swimming. He jumped into the water, swam to the horse, grasped its mane, and together they crossed the river. As he emerged from the water, he noticed the Dakota's horse he had shot swimming behind him. This dark bay horse had a white streak on its forehead and a necklace of deer hooves that rattled as it swam, crossing the river slightly upstream from him. The horse, in a state of panic, galloped past Red Bear, just a short distance away, snorting in fear. Red Bear noticed that the saddle was stained with blood at the front. From the bushes, 5 or 6 white soldiers emerged after crossing the river, followed closely by the horse belonging to Bobtailed Bull. The Dakota horse that Red Bear was guiding bolted after the others. Meanwhile, Little Brave continued to ride at a slow pace, gesturing for Red Bear to be cautious. The Dakotas were firing down at them from the hills above. Red Bear interpreted Little Brave's signal as a request to capture a horse for him, as his own mount was fatigued. Consequently, Red Bear dismounted and seized a rope trailing from one of the 2 horses, either the Dakota horse or Bobtailed Bull's. However, the frightened horse pulled him through the underbrush, causing him to lose his moccasins in the river and injure his bare feet on the thorny rose bushes. The horse dragged him upstream toward the ridge's end, while Little Brave and the soldiers advanced toward the Dakota firing line. Eventually, Red Bear let go of the rope and climbed back onto his own horse. He did not see Little Brave again and feared that the soldiers had all perished. As he approached the ridge's end, he observed numerous soldiers in retreat. Leading them was Reno, who had a white handkerchief tied around his head, his mouth and beard frothy, and his eyes wild and frantic. The soldiers accompanying Reno mistook Red Bear for a Dakota and aimed their carbines at him. However, Red Bear rode closer to Reno and struck him on the chest with an open hand, shouting, "Scout, scout!" Reno responded, "The Sioux, the Sioux." "Where?" Red Bear pointed down over the ridge, indicating the position of the Dakotas. An officer with 3 stripes then handed Red Bear some cartridges, addressing him as John. The soldiers fired indiscriminately at the Dakotas, positioned higher on the ridge, without taking aim. A bullet grazed Red Bear's coat at the armpit. A wounded Dakota horse galloped towards them, prompting Red Bear to attempt to capture it. However, the soldiers shot the horse before he could reach it. Reno's group made a brief stop, but he faced difficulties in maintaining cohesion among his men as they continued to retreat. Eventually, the Dakotas also withdrew and ceased their gunfire. The remaining scouts regrouped with Reno's men, although 7 scouts were unaccounted for. Young Hawk, Bloody Knife, Bob-tailed Bull, Little Brave, Forked Horn, Red Foolish Bear, and Goose. After failing to catch the injured Dakota horse, Red Bear remounted his own horse. He had last seen Little Brave riding slowly towards him, but lost sight of him as he ascended the ridge. At that point, he encountered White Cloud, a Dakota scout, who informed him that the Iroquois scouts had captured several Dakota horses but had not yet returned. White Cloud proposed that they join the other scouts with the horses. Red Bear led 2 horses he had discovered, while White Cloud led 1. As they approached a small hill, they noticed 4 riders approaching, initially mistaking them for Dakotas. They turned back towards Reno's position, only to realize that the riders were Crow scouts, who recognized Red Bear and greeted him warmly. Red Bear halted and called back to White Cloud, recognizing the Crow scouts by the distinctive red markings on their white shirts. The Crow scouts stopped, and the groups rode together. They reported that 2 of their comrades had been killed on the ridge and expressed their intention to recover the bodies before returning. Red Bear and White Cloud waited for them, but after a considerable time, Red Bear suggested they head back to Reno's position, assuming the Crow scouts would not return. Upon their return, they found Reno and his soldiers still present, and shortly thereafter, the scouts who had retrieved fresh horses also returned. The scouts began to arrive, starting with Bull in the Water, followed by Strikes 2, Red Star, Boy Chief, One Feather, Soldier, Stabbed, Strikes the Lodge, and Little Sioux. Subsequently, the remaining scouts arrived, bringing with them a herd of approximately 40 captured horses, which included Charging Bull, Bull, Red Wolf, and White Eagle. At Reno's position, the soldiers occupied higher ground, while the scouts assembled about 10 rods down the slope. Stabbed rode around, addressing the scouts with a speech. "What are we doing, scouts?" "We must adhere to Custer's orders in the event of defeat. He instructed us to retreat to the Powder River, where the other scouts, wagons, and supplies are located." Pretty Face, who had joined them from the pack mule train, was also present. Although Red Bear had not encountered the mule train, it was likely that Pretty Face was with the herd scouts on their return journey. The scouts selected to accompany the horses included Bull in the Water, Charging Bull, Red Wolf, White Eagle, Red Star, Pretty Face, Red Bear, One Feather, PTAT, a Dakota scout, and they set off with the herd. Those who remained to defend were Strikes 2, Stabbed, Soldier, Boy Chief, Strikes the Lodge, Little Sioux, White Cloud, C.A. Rue, Dakota Scouts, ESK, Half-Breed Dakota Interpreter, and Bull. The 10 scouts leading the horse herd had scarcely begun their journey when another Dakota scout, Bear Waiting, Metaxia, joined the group assigned to hold off the Dakotas. Red Bear and his fellow scouts continued onward, passing a solitary teepee and traveling 6 miles beyond it by sundown, following the same trail they had taken earlier that morning. Soon Bull caught up with them, having been sent by Strikes 2 with a message to quicken their pace, as the Dakotas were being dismantled and a pursuit was feared. Bull joined the group, and after sunset, Red Wolf and Bull in the Water rode ahead of the herd. As darkness enveloped the area, they heard 3 shots fired ahead of them, causing alarm among the scouts. They swiftly encircled the herd and advanced, arriving at Rosebud Valley under the cover of darkness. The 2 scouts who had been in the lead retreated upon hearing gunfire and rejoined the herd, realizing that the Dakotas were closing in and that a hasty escape was necessary. They chose fresh horses and moved ahead. The remaining scouts who were driving the herd from the rear noticed a cloud of dust rising from the trail behind them, signaling that the Dakotas were in pursuit. They too selected fresh mounts and maneuvered around the herd, continuing until they spotted the dark line of timber ahead, feeling exhausted and parched. They paused at the edge of the timber, while one scout rode forward to locate a muddy waterhole over a cut bank. The scout called out to the others and they guided their horses down the bank to the water source. Each scout fashioned a makeshift drinking spot with their hands and drank from the hole as it filled. Unfortunately, there was insufficient water for the horses. While they rested and conversed, one scout, known as Whole Buffalo, mentioned that he was familiar with the route out, and they followed him to the Rosebud River, arriving at midnight. They proceeded to the present-day Cheyenne Agency, reaching it at dawn. Subsequently, they ascended a high ridge and paused to observe the Dakota's Sundance below. The Dakota scout advised them to remain in place for the day, as it would allow them to survey their surroundings from all angles. They spent the day resting, with some scouts sleeping while others maintained watch. At sunset, they resumed their journey, traveling through the night until they reached the camp where Bloody Knife had been killed at dawn. The scouts rummaged through the remnants of the camp and found meat and hardtack for breakfast. They crossed the Rosebud River at the same location as before and discovered that Stabb's scout party had already crossed ahead of them in a hurry, as evidenced by the tracks left by Stabb's mule. Upon following the Rosebud River to its confluence, they reached the old campsite in the final parade ground, where they discovered traces of a recent campfire, including cooking cans. They inferred that this was the breakfast site of the preceding party, and noting that it was now around noon, continued along the bank of the Rosebud, where they found boxes of partially spoiled hardtack. They loaded these onto their saddles and resumed their journey. The group led by Strike's two mistakenly identified Red Bear's party as Dakota Indians and quickened their pace, vanishing from view. Red Bear's party followed the old Custer Trail at a leisurely pace until they approached the Tongue River, where they set up camp in the timber atop a ridge. The following morning, they crossed the Tongue River and encountered the location where a soldier had been brutally killed. As they pressed on, they arrived at the Powder River camp, where they reunited with Strike's Two's party, a company of infantry, and a wagon train led by the commander, distinguished by his white hat, from Fort Buford. Through interpreters, the Santee, half-breed Dakota, and Crow Bear, Gros Ventre. The scouts conveyed their insights regarding the battle to the officer. He assembled the scouts and directed them to bring in their horses, selecting the two finest for Foolish Bear and White Cloud to deliver messages to the officer who had ascended the Elk River by steamboat to the mouth of the Bighorn River. The two scouts swam their horses across the Yellowstone or Elk River, towing a small raft containing their carbines and a message. They rode to the mouth of the Bighorn River and returned after several days to summon Strike's Two and Bull in the Water to cross over and deliver the mail to Fort Buford. Foolish Bear and White Cloud then recrossed the river, reuniting with the other scouts. Red Bear never saw Little Brave again and presumed that all the soldiers had perished. It is my hope that this first-hand account provides you with a fresh perspective on the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more videos like this. I aspire to provide you with more personal narratives of various battles. Wishing you a wonderful day, and I look forward to our next meeting.